12 years of marriage. I thought we were rock solid. Sure, things weren't perfect. No marriage ever is, but I always believed Laura and I had an unspoken agreement. Loyalty above all else. We met in college, and our relationship blossomed quickly. Laura was the kind of woman who lit up a room, charming everyone with her wit and smile. I fell hard, and for the longest time, I thought she had too. Recently, though, something changed. It started small, like a whisper in the back of my mind that refused to be ignored. Laura began acting distant, like she was holding a breath around me. She'd leave the house more often, citing work obligations or girls' nights, even though she'd never been much of a social butterfly. Then there was the phone, her constant companion. It buzzed endlessly, and every time it did, she'd smirk or chuckle before tilting the screen away from me. But the real red flag came last week. She sat me down after dinner, her expression somewhere between guilt and arrogance. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice unsettlingly calm. "I've been feeling restless. Our life, it's too predictable. I want something thrilling, something new." "What are you talking about?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I'm going on a date," she said bluntly, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "It's just for the experience. Don't worry, I'll make it up to you later." I stared at her, my stomach twisting in knots. "You're joking," I said, laughing nervously, hoping this was some bizarre prank. Her face hardened. "No, I'm serious. This isn't about you, Dave. It's about me. I need this." "You need this? Laura, you're my wife. What about our vows? Our family?" I was furious, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay composed. She shrugged, her tone dripping with indifference. "Look, I'll come back and we can move on. You're overreacting." Overreacting? The audacity of her words stunned me into silence. After everything we built together, the years of sacrifice, the late nights comforting each other through hard times, she was throwing it away for some cheap thrill. I warned her. I told her there would be consequences. "You're making a huge mistake," I said, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. But she just smirked, brushing me off like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her path. "I'll be fine," she said, standing and walking out of the room without so much as a backward glance. As I sat alone in the silence of our living room, a storm of emotions swirled inside me. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. But more than anything, I felt determination. She wanted a thrill. She wanted to see how far she could push me. Fine. But she'd soon learn that actions have consequences, and I wasn't going to let her trample over my life without a fight. That night, I started preparing for what was to come. I wasn't going to let her rewrite our story on her terms. The next chapter would be mine. The morning after Laura dropped her bombshell, I woke up early. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't let me sleep. She hadn't come home yet. The empty side of the bed was a glaring reminder of the betrayal brewing just beneath the surface of our marriage. I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. "I'll make it up to you later." Like my trust, my dignity, and our entire relationship could be patched up with some half-hearted gesture. I went about my usual routine, making coffee and tidying up, but everything felt different. The walls of our house, which once felt like a sanctuary, now seemed like they were closing in on me. My phone buzzed on the counter. For a moment, I foolishly hoped it was Laura, maybe apologizing, maybe realizing the absurdity of what she was doing. But it wasn't. It was my brother, Ethan. "Dave," Ethan said as I answered, his voice warm but firm. "You good? You sound off." I hesitated, debating whether I should tell him everything. Ethan was protective of me, sometimes overly so, and I knew this would set him off. But I needed someone to vent to, Someone who wouldn't sugarcoat things or tell me to sit and wait. Laura told me she's going on a date, I blurted out, my voice cracking slightly. There was a long pause. She what? Ethan's disbelief was palpable. She said she wanted something thrilling, something new, like she's auditioning for some damn reality show or something. Are you serious? And you let her? What was I supposed to do, lock her in the house? I snapped, frustrated at both him and myself. She didn't exactly ask for permission, Ethan. She just announced it like it was no big deal. Well, what's the plan? He asked after a moment, his voice calmer. Because you can't just sit there and let her walk all over you. I'm not, I said firmly, though the plan was still forming in my mind. I'm going to figure out exactly what she's up to. She wants to treat this like some game? Fine. I'll play. Ethan sighed. Just don't do anything stupid, all right? Call me if you need backup. By the time I hung up, I had a clearer idea of my next move. I wasn't going to confront Laura directly. Not yet. If she wanted to lie, then I needed to catch her in those lies. The first step was gathering evidence. That afternoon, I went through our shared bank account and credit card statements. Nothing screamed affair just yet, but a few transactions stood out. Dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, a boutique clothing store she rarely shopped at, and a recent purchase from a spa. Laura was always careful with money, so these charges felt out of character. The next step was her phone. I waited until she came home late that evening, her face flushed and her demeanor smug. Had a nice time? I asked casually, leaning against the kitchen counter as she walked in. Wonderful, she replied with a smirk, tossing her purse onto the couch. You should try not being so uptight, Dave. It's liberating. I forced a tight smile, biting back the retort bubbling in my throat. Good to know. Later, while she showered, I slipped her phone off the counter and quickly glanced through her messages. Most of them were harmless chats with coworkers and a few group texts with friends. But one name caught my attention. Eric. I didn't recognize it, and the texts were brief and vague, mostly about meeting up and confirming plans. By the time she came out of the bathroom, I had already put her phone back. My heart was pounding, not just from the fear of being caught, but from the confirmation that something wasn't right. The final straw came 2 days later. Laura told me she was going out again, this time just with friends. But when she left, I followed her. I kept my distance, making sure she didn't notice me tailing her car. She drove across town, eventually pulling into the parking lot of a trendy restaurant. I parked a few spaces away and watched as she got out of her car. My stomach churned when I saw him, a tall, well-dressed man waiting near the entrance. Laura greeted him with a smile I hadn't seen in years, her hand brushing his arm as they walked inside together. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. This was it, the proof I needed. But instead of confronting her then and there, I drove home. When she walked through the door that night, humming a tune and smelling of wine, I didn't say a word. I just watched her, my resolve hardening. She thought she could play me, thought I'd roll over and accept her lies, but she had no idea what was coming. That night, I started documenting everything. If Laura wanted to destroy our marriage, I'd make sure she owned every single piece of the wreckage. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Laura's smirks, her dismissive tone, her thinly veiled insults, it was all fuel now. She didn't know it, but the game had officially changed. She declared herself the player, but I was determined to make her the pawn. Step one was information. If I wanted to expose her, I needed evidence that even her slick tongue couldn't twist. I called Ethan and filled him in on what I'd seen. She met him at a restaurant, I said, pacing the living room. I need to figure out who this Eric guy really is. I might know someone who can help, Ethan said after a pause. You remember Mike, the PI I told you about a while back? He's good, discreet, and he doesn't waste time. I hesitated. Hiring a private investigator felt extreme, but then again, Laura had gone to extremes herself. All right, I said, get me his number. Within hours, I was sitting in a dimly lit office, the walls lined with certificates and framed photos of Mike shaking hands with various people, some famous, some not. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy, built like a retired linebacker, with sharp eyes that seemed to read me the moment I walked in. All right, Dave, he said, leaning back in his chair. Tell me what's going on. I laid it all out. Laura's sudden behavior changes, the suspicious transactions, the man at the restaurant. Mike listened without interrupting, jotting down notes occasionally. When I finished, he nodded. Sounds like a classic case. Don't worry, we'll get to the bottom of it. Do you have access to her phone or social media accounts? Some, I admitted, but she's careful, keeps her phone locked most of the time. No problem. If you can get me her number and any known social media profiles, I'll take it from there. Give me a week. As I left Mike's office, I felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. Part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong, that there was some logical explanation for all of this. But deep down I knew better. The first crack. Mike didn't need a full week. 3 days later he called me. Dave, we need to meet. I've got something you'll want to see. I met him at his office, my stomach in knots. He handed me a folder, his expression grim. Inside were photos, clear as day, of Laura and Eric walking arm in arm into a hotel. Another showed them laughing together in a bar, her hand resting on his leg. And then there were the texts. Mike had managed to get a hold of her phone records and the messages between her and Eric. They were explicit, not just emotionally intimate, but full of plans and innuendos. I'm sorry, man, Mike said, his voice heavy with sympathy. I've seen a lot of this, but it doesn't make it any easier. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the evidence. This wasn't just a fling. Laura was deeply involved with this guy, building a life outside of ours. On the way home, my mind raced. The logical part of me knew I needed to stay calm, to use this evidence wisely. But the emotional part of me, the husband who had given 12 years of his life to someone who now treated him like dirt, wanted to confront her immediately. That evening, Laura came home late again. She barely glanced at me as she kicked off her shoes and headed for the kitchen. Long day? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Exhausting, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. You wouldn't understand. I'm sure, I replied, watching her carefully. By the way, who's Eric? Her hand froze mid-air, the glass of wine hovering near her lips. She set it down slowly and turned to face me, her expression a mix of confusion and irritation. What are you talking about? You heard me, I said, holding her gaze. Eric. Who is he? She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Oh my God, Dave, are you seriously going through my stuff now? That's pathetic. Pathetic, I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. You've been lying to me for weeks, sneaking around, and I'm pathetic for asking questions. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she said, rolling her eyes. Eric's just a friend. We worked together on a couple of projects. That's it. Then why the hotel, Laura? I snapped, stepping closer. Why the texts, the dinners? Explain that. Her eyes widened, and for a split second I saw panic flash across her face. But then she recovered, her tone turning icy. You're delusional, she said. This is why I needed a break, Dave. You're so paranoid, so controlling. No wonder things haven't been working between us. Her words stung, but I refused to let her twist this around on me. Don't you dare put this on me, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You're the one who broke our vows. You're the one who chose to lie. Maybe if you'd been paying attention to me, she shot back, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The room fell silent except for the sound of my breathing. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression defiant. Get out, I said finally, my voice low and steady. What? You heard me. Pack a bag and leave. Go stay with Eric if he's so important to you. She scoffed, grabbing her wine glass and heading for the stairs. You're unbelievable. I'm not going anywhere, Dave. This is my house, too. I didn't argue. Not then. But as she stormed off, I made a silent vow. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. The evidence was already in my hands, and I wasn't afraid to use it. That night, sleep was out of the question. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the folder of evidence laid out on the coffee table. Laura's words echoed in my head. You're paranoid. You're controlling. Maybe if you paid attention to me. She had done everything she could to shift the blame, to make me the villain in this twisted narrative. But I wasn't buying it. If she thought I was going to let her waltz around playing house with Eric while using me as her doormat, she had another thing coming. The next morning, I called Ethan. I need you to watch the kids this evening, I said, my tone firm. Of course, he said, no questions asked. What's going on? Let's just say I'm about to turn the tables. After dropping the kids off with Ethan, I met with Mike to discuss my next move. He greeted me with a look that was half amusement, half concern. You look like a man on a mission. I am, I replied. Laura doesn't know it yet, but I'm about to make her very uncomfortable.
Mike had pulled more records since our last meeting, including some financial transactions that didn't sit well with me. Laura had been dipping into our joint savings, thousands of dollars, all unaccounted for. When I asked Mike about it, he grinned.
She's sloppy. People like her always are. They think they're invincible, but there's always a trail.
By the time I left Mike's office, I had a plan.
It wasn't just about exposing her. It was about taking back control. The setup. That evening, while Laura was out again, probably with Eric, I sat down with my lawyer, Sarah. She was sharp, ruthless, and exactly what I needed. After I laid out everything, the photos, the texts, the financial discrepancies, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She's toast, Sarah said, tapping her pen on the table. But you need to be strategic about this. Don't confront her head-on just yet. Let her dig herself deeper. I nodded, the gears in my mind turning. What about the house, the kids? I don't want her pulling any tricks to get the upper hand. We'll file for a temporary custody order, Sarah said. Given the evidence, the court will likely side with you. As for the house, it's marital property. But if you can prove she's been financially reckless or using it for her extracurricular activities, we might have leverage. By the time I left her office, I felt a surge of confidence. Laura thought she was untouchable, but she'd underestimated me. The confrontation that wasn't. Laura came home late that night, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she walked into the living room. She didn't even acknowledge me, heading straight for the kitchen to pour herself a glass of wine. Long night? I asked, keeping my tone casual. She froze, glancing over her shoulder. What's it to you? Just curious, I said, leaning back on the couch. You've been working a lot of late nights lately. She smirked, swirling the wine in her glass. Someone has to keep this household running. You wouldn't understand. Her arrogance was infuriating, but I forced myself to stay calm. You're right, I said, standing up. I wouldn't understand. But you know what I do understand? Lies, deception, betrayal. Her smirk faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "Oh, here we go," she said, rolling her eyes. "Another one of your conspiracy theories. Do you ever get tired of being so insecure?" I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. "This isn't about insecurity, Laura. This is about the truth. And trust me, it's going to come out, whether you like it or not." She set her glass down with a loud clink, her eyes narrowing. "What are you trying to say, Dave?" "Nothing," I said, turning toward the stairs. "Not yet, anyway." As I walked away, I could feel her eyes boring into my back. She was rattled, and that was exactly what I wanted. The next move. The following day, I set the next phase of my plan into motion. I contacted the bank to freeze our joint accounts, citing unauthorized transactions. Then I changed the locks on the house. Legally, she still had a right to the property, but I wanted to send a message. Things were different now. When Laura came home that evening and found herself locked out, her reaction was exactly what I'd expected. She pounded on the door, shouting my name. "Dave, open the door! What the hell is this?" I opened the door just enough to see her face, flushed with anger. "New rules, Laura," I said, my tone calm but firm. "You want to stay here? We're going to have a real conversation about everything." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. For the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. She stepped inside, her heels clicking angrily on the floor. "Fine," she said, crossing her arms. "Talk." I didn't say anything at first. Instead, I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the folder of evidence Mike had compiled. I handed it to her without a word. "What's this?" she asked, flipping it open. Her face went pale as she scanned the photos, the texts, the financial records. She slammed the folder shut and glared at me. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself," I said evenly. "Something you stopped doing a long time ago." For the first time, Laura didn't have a snarky comeback. She looked genuinely shaken. But I wasn't done yet. "Here's the deal," I said, stepping closer. "You can pack your things and leave quietly, or we can take this to court. Either way, I'm done playing your games." Her lips trembled, and for a moment I thought she might actually apologize. But then her defiance returned. "You think you're so smart," she spat. "You think this is over? It's not." She grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I felt like I was ready for whatever came next. Laura didn't stay silent for long. The next morning, as I was making breakfast for the kids, my phone buzzed relentlessly. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just her throwing another tantrum. But when my brother Ethan called, his tone serious, I knew something was up. "Dave, have you seen Facebook?" he asked. "No," I replied, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "What's going on?" "She posted this long rant about you," Ethan said, pausing for effect. "She's saying you're abusive, controlling, and that you've been gaslighting her for years." I froze, spatula in hand. My stomach churned as I opened the app. Sure enough, there it was. A post on her profile filled with dramatic accusations, painting me as the villain in our story. The comment section was a war zone, with some people offering her sympathy and others calling her out for airing her dirty laundry. She'd also posted a photo of herself crying, a move so manipulative it would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. "What's her endgame?" Ethan asked. "She's trying to control the narrative," I said through gritted teeth. "She knows the truth is coming out, so she's trying to discredit me before I can say anything." "What are you going to do?" he asked. "Nothing," I said after a moment. "Not yet, anyway. The fallout at work." It didn't take long for Laura's post to have real-world consequences. That afternoon, my boss called me into his office. I'd been working at the same company for almost a decade and had a solid reputation. But now that was in jeopardy. "Dave, I hate to bring this up," my boss Mark said, looking uncomfortable. "But there's been some chatter." "Chatter?" I repeated, already knowing where this was going. "Someone sent me a link to a Facebook post," he said, sighing. "Your wife's post. I don't want to pry, but it's causing some distractions in the office." I felt a surge of anger and embarrassment. Laura wasn't just attacking me personally. She was trying to ruin my career. I took a deep breath and explained the situation as calmly as I could. "Mark, I'm going through a messy separation," I said. "She's making up lies to save face. I assure you, nothing she's saying is true." Mark nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I figured as much. Just keep it contained, okay? I don't want this affecting your work." "Understood," I said, though I was already plotting my next move. Turning the tables. That evening, I sat down with Sarah, my lawyer, and showed her Laura's post. She skimmed through it, her expression unreadable. "This actually works in your favor," she said finally. "How?" I asked, incredulous. "She's trying to play the victim, but she's leaving a paper trail," Sarah explained. "Everything she posts online can be used against her in court. The more she tries to manipulate the narrative, the worse it looks for her." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "So what's the next step?" "We're filing for an emergency order of protection," Sarah said. "Not because you're in physical danger, but because her behavior is escalating. We'll also use her post as evidence of emotional harassment." The unexpected ally. The next day, something happened that I didn't see coming. I got a message from Laura's best friend, Jenna. We'd never been close, but her tone was surprisingly sympathetic. "Hey Dave," the message read. "I just want you to know I'm sorry for everything Laura is putting you through. I didn't know how bad things were until recently." I stared at the screen, unsure if I could trust her. Was this some kind of trap? But then she sent a second message. Screenshots of her conversations with Laura. In them, Laura admitted to the affair and bragged about how she was going to ruin me. "I'm not proud of what she's doing," Jenna wrote. "I just thought you should have this." I forwarded the messages to Sarah immediately. They were the missing puzzle piece. Proof that Laura wasn't just cheating, but that she was actively trying to sabotage me. The confrontation. That evening, Laura showed up at the house unannounced. She was furious, banging on the door like a madwoman. I opened it just enough to speak to her, keeping the chain lock in place. "What do you want, Laura?" I asked, my tone cold. "You think you're so clever," she spat. "Freezing the accounts, changing the locks, dragging me through the mud. What kind of father does that to the mother of his kids?" "A father who's done being lied to," I replied. "And you're one to talk about dragging people through the mud. Have you seen your Facebook post lately?" Her eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly composed herself. "You're pathetic, Dave. This is why I left you. You're weak. A real man would have fought for his family." I laughed bitterly. "You mean the way you fought for us? By sneaking around with Eric? Save it, Laura. The court's going to see right through you." Her smug expression faltered, but she quickly recovered. "You think you've won. This isn't over." "No," I said, slamming the door in her face. "It's just beginning." Preparing for the showdown. That night, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting to Laura's chaos. I was one step ahead of it. With the evidence Jenna provided and Sarah's legal expertise, I was finally ready to take this fight to court. Laura thought she could destroy me, but she underestimated one thing. I wasn't playing her game anymore. I was playing mine. The day of the court hearing finally arrived, and the atmosphere was heavy with tension. I sat at one table with Sarah, my lawyer, and Laura was across from me, flanked by her smug, overly confident attorney. Laura wore a tailored black dress, her hair pulled into an immaculate bun, trying to exude an aura of control. But the cracks in her facade were already visible. The forced smile, the nervous tapping of her pen. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, entered, and the courtroom fell silent. As proceedings began, Laura's lawyer launched into an emotional argument, painting Laura as a devoted wife and mother who had been driven to explore herself because of my alleged neglect. Mrs. Taylor is simply seeking an equitable arrangement for custody and financial support, her lawyer droned. She has acted in the best interest of the children at every step. I clenched my fists under the table. Laura's lies were bold and theatrical, but Sarah had prepared me for this. When it was our turn, Sarah rose with a calm, commanding presence and began dismantling their story, exposing the lies. Sarah began by introducing the financial evidence, Laura's credit card statements, which showed lavish purchases unrelated to our family. Next came Jenna's screenshots, where Laura admitted to the affair and mocked my pathetic attempts to figure things out. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow, and I could see Laura squirming in her seat. The real turning point came when Sarah brought up the Facebook post. "Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge, "my client has endured an online smear campaign orchestrated by Mrs. Taylor, intended to damage his reputation both personally and professionally. We have screenshots of the post, as well as testimony from witnesses who were targeted by her accusations." Sarah handed the evidence to the judge, who studied it with a frown. Laura's lawyer tried to object, claiming it was irrelevant, but the judge waved him off. "This demonstrates a pattern of behavior that is not in the children's best interest," the judge said. "Mrs. Taylor, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Laura opened her mouth, but for once, words failed her. Danielle's testimony. The next bombshell came in the form of Danielle, the wife of Laura's lover, Eric. She testified with icy precision, describing how she had discovered the affair and how it had destroyed their marriage. She also confirmed that Laura had encouraged Eric to move in with her, despite the chaos it would bring to both families. As Danielle spoke, I saw Laura's composure unravel further. Her lawyer scribbled furiously, but it was clear they were losing the narrative. By the time Danielle finished, the courtroom was abuzz with murmurs, and the judge called for order. The turning point. When it was my turn to speak, I focused on the kids. I talked about the nights I stayed up with them when Laura disappeared, about the lies I had to tell to protect them from the truth. I didn't bash Laura directly. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. "I'm not perfect," I said, my voice steady. "But I've always put my children first. They deserve stability, and they deserve honesty, two things their mother hasn't provided." As I finished, I glanced at Laura. Her glare could have burned a hole through steel, but I didn't care. I was no longer afraid of her. The verdict. After a short recess, the judge returned with her decision. "Based on the evidence presented," she began, "it is clear that Mrs. Taylor's actions have been detrimental to the well-being of the children. Mr. Taylor will retain primary custody, with Mrs. Taylor granted supervised visitation. Additionally, the court finds that Mrs. Taylor's financial misconduct warrants a review of her claims to marital assets." The gavel struck, and it was over. Laura sat frozen, her face pale. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but she didn't respond. Meanwhile, Sarah gave me a small nod, her version of a victory dance. The fallout. Outside the courthouse, Laura cornered me in the parking lot. "You think you've won?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "This isn't over, Dave." "No," I said calmly. "It's just done." She stormed off, and for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The battle had been brutal, but I had fought for what mattered most: my kids, my integrity, and my future. As I drove home, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the horizon. It felt symbolic, a new chapter beginning. Laura's chaos might not be completely behind me, but for the first time I felt ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The days following the court's decision felt surreal. The kids and I settled into a routine that was blissfully free of Laura's disruptions. For the first time in years, the house felt like a sanctuary instead of a battlefield. I'd wake up early to make breakfast, drive the kids to school, and then head to work, knowing there wasn't a shadow hanging over me. The kids were adjusting better than I could have hoped. They didn't ask too many questions about Laura, which was both a relief and a reminder of how distant she'd been from their lives even before the divorce. They seemed happier, more at ease, and for once their laughter wasn't tinged with the tension that used to permeate our home. But Laura wasn't one to fade quietly into the background. I knew better than to think this was the end. Her silence felt more like the calm before a storm, and I braced myself for whatever she'd try next. It started with texts, short, passive-aggressive messages that alternated between guilt-tripping and outright threats. "You've brainwashed the kids," one said. Another read, "You'll regret taking everything from me." I ignored them, forwarding each one to Sarah, my lawyer, who reassured me that they were just empty attempts to provoke me. Still, they lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder that Laura wasn't done yet. Then came the unexpected call. It was from Danielle, the ex-wife of Laura's affair partner, Eric. "Dave, I thought you should know," she began, her voice cautious. "Laura's been reaching out to Eric again." I froze. Why would she do that? Their affair blew up both our marriages. Danielle sighed. "I think she's desperate. She's been trying to spin some story about how you've ruined her life and how Eric should be on her side. He's not biting, but I figured you'd want to know." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. Laura's pattern of manipulation was relentless, and it seemed she was grasping at straws to regain control of the narrative. But if she thought I was going to crumble, she was in for a rude awakening. That weekend, Laura made her next move. She showed up at the kids' soccer game unannounced, standing off to the side with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. The kids noticed her immediately, their excitement tempered by confusion. "Mommy's here!" my youngest exclaimed, running toward her. I let out a slow breath, plastering on a neutral expression as I approached them. "Laura, you're not supposed to be here. You know the visitation rules." She smiled sweetly, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I'm just here to watch my kids play. That's not a crime, is it?" Before I could respond, one of the other parents, a friend of mine named Mark, stepped up. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Laura's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, everything's fine. Just a misunderstanding." Mark didn't budge. "Good, let's keep it that way." I guided the kids back to the field, doing my best to shield them from the tension. Laura stayed for the rest of the game, standing at a distance but making her presence known. When it was over, she tried to approach us again, but I shut it down. "Laura, you need to leave. Now." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't keep me away from my kids forever." "I'm not, but you'll follow the rules or you won't see them at all." She glared at me for a long moment before turning and walking away, her heels clicking against the pavement. I watched her go, a mix of relief and frustration washing over me. She was testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses, but I wasn't going to give her any. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, my youngest looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Why doesn't Mommy live with us anymore?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my voice steady. "Sometimes grown-ups don't get along, buddy. But no matter what, Mommy and I both love you very much." He nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer, and I kissed his forehead before turning out the light. As I closed the door, I felt a pang of sadness. Laura's actions had forced me to become both mother and father, protector and nurturer. It was exhausting, but it was worth it to give my kids the stability they deserved. The following week, Laura escalated her antics. She posted a long, dramatic rant on social media, accusing me of alienating the kids and painting herself as the victim. Friends and acquaintances reached out, some offering support, others asking if the claims were true. I refused to engage publicly, but I made sure Sarah was aware of it. "She's digging her own grave," Sarah said during our next meeting. "The more erratic she gets, the better our case looks if she tries to contest custody again." Despite Sarah's reassurance, the stress was taking its toll. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself for another round of drama. But I reminded myself why I was fighting: to protect my kids and build a life free of Laura's chaos. And for the first time, I felt like I was winning. Just as things seemed to settle, Laura pulled her most audacious stunt yet. It started with a call from my lawyer, Sarah, on a rainy Monday morning. "Dave," she began, her tone sharp, "I just received notice that Laura's filed a formal appeal for full custody." "What?" I nearly dropped my coffee. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on." "That's true," Sarah agreed. "But it's not about winning. This is a tactic to drain you emotionally and financially. She's hoping you'll cave under the pressure." I rubbed my temples, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "What's her angle this time?" I sighed. "She's claiming parental alienation, saying you're turning the kids against her. It's flimsy, but we'll need to prepare." I hung up and sat in silence for a moment, watching the rain streak down the window. Laura's audacity was boundless, but I wasn't going to let her win. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, combing through text messages, call logs, and emails to show the court her erratic behavior and disregard for the kids' well-being. Then the unexpected happened. One evening, as I was helping my youngest with his homework, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Danielle, Eric's ex-wife, standing on my porch with a folder in hand. "Danielle?" I asked, surprised. "What's going on?" "I thought you should see this," she said, stepping inside and handing me the folder. Inside were screenshots of messages between Laura and Eric, plans for meetings, bitter complaints about me, and worst of all, discussions about how to manipulate the court system to her advantage. "She's been trying to rope Eric back in," Danielle explained, her voice tinged with disgust. "But he's finally seeing through her. He sent me these and told me to do whatever I wanted with them." I stared at the evidence, a mix of gratitude and disbelief washing over me. "This is a game changer. Thank you, Danielle." "Just take her down," she said with a small smile before leaving. Armed with this new evidence, Sarah and I crafted an airtight case. The custody hearing was set for 2 weeks later, and while I dreaded stepping back into a courtroom, I was ready. The day of the hearing, Laura arrived with her high-priced lawyer and an air of defiance. She shot me a smug smile, as if she thought she'd already won. But as the proceedings began, her confidence began to crack. Sarah presented the evidence methodically, starting with Laura's breach of visitation rules and her erratic behavior. Then came the messages from Eric, revealing her true motives and the extent of her manipulations. By the time Danielle took the stand and testified about Laura's deceit, Laura's composure was in shambles. When it was Laura's turn to speak, she tried to play the victim, painting me as controlling and unreasonable. But the evidence was irrefutable, and her arguments fell flat. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Laura's appeal was denied. Her visitation remained supervised, and she was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees for filing a baseless claim. As we left the courtroom, Laura turned to me, her face twisted with anger. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "I regret trusting you for so long. But I don't regret protecting my kids." The days that followed were peaceful. For the first time in years, Laura's defeat seemed to deflate her, and she finally retreated from our lives. The kids and I settled into a new routine, one filled with laughter and a sense of safety that had been missing for far too long. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, my eldest joined me. "Dad," he said, his voice thoughtful, "things feel better now." "They do," I agreed, ruffling his hair, "and they're only going to get better." Looking back, I realized Laura's betrayal, as painful as it was, had taught me invaluable lessons. It showed me the strength I didn't know I had, and the importance of standing up for what mattered most. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and for the first time, that was enough.